Call the meeting to order, please. Start with the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Warner.
Yeah.
Secretary Treasurer Howard.
Here.
Trustee Pat.
Present.
Trustee Stafford.
Here.
Trustee Walker.
Here.
So we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Tonight is October 1st, 2019, Remsenburg Elementary School. In conversation with one of the past trustees, John Samla, him and I were discussing on the way up how the trustees, when we first started out back in the 1600s, this would be a regular course of action as far as the trustees going from town to town, tavern to tavern, American Hotel. Some of the hotels in East Quogue would be used for the trustees' meeting rooms and the local bars. So it's interesting that we've taken on this night meeting course, with discussion of the board and help with CTV, Charles and his son, and our staff, and the town's blessing with our special counsel Joe Lombardo. So it's nice to reach out to the public in their own towns and have discussions current to them and issues that are basically they're working with or on to for us to hear and to be able to help resolve. So I just wanted to say that and get that out of the way. We have several discussions tonight. The first one is Aaron Tachunian, co-founder of the Murchison Bay Project, a great project which has been going on for probably 5 or 6 years, maybe a little bit longer, in both towns, Brookhaven and Southampton Town. And it's been, Aaron's passion as our board's passion to restore good water quality to Murchison Bay. I grew up in Murchison Bay in the 70s and 60s, clamming and fishing, and everybody on this board feels very strongly that we would like to get it back to where we started. So Aaron, would you like to come? Yes.
Okay. That's fine. So President Warner and board, really appreciate the opportunity to come here with my co-founder, Laura Fabrizio. Everything we did is her fault or her credit. That's all I can tell you. She was really the inspiration for creating the Murchison Bay Project. And I'm happy to come in front of this board and talk about our 5 years of progress and to thank this board for their embracing of our project and the partnership and the collaboration that they've shown us throughout this entire time. And as you'll see, as we go on, we've accomplished a lot. We've got a lot to do, but we have a really good team in place, and we're pretty excited about the future. So in 2019, we've done a couple of things, and you should have a copy of this presentation right in front of you, so you don't have to twist your neck around.
Great.
And so in 2019, we hit all the goals we started out to do. Number one is we're trying to raise 1 million oysters a year. Our object is to get our production capacity up to 1 million oysters a year. Right now, we're 3/4 of the way there. We're going to hit our goal of 750,000 oysters, and I'm going to show you in a little while why that's so important. Number two, we have 4 functioning floating upweller systems, or FLUPSIs, that are producing in excess of 100,000 oysters in each one. We actually have 5 oyster farms. We added a 5th one this year. This says 4, but I was corrected. We continue to engage thousands of residents, engage and educate and work with thousands of residents on the annual basis, which is really the tremendous source of our ability to accomplish what we're doing with volunteer labor. And we've continued this great partnership with the town trustees and with Cornell Cooperative Extension that without these types of collaborations, we would simply not be able to do what we're doing, especially Cornell, who supplies us not just with oysters, but with decades of expertise in how we conduct our operations and provide tremendous educational hands-on exhibits, and then of course the expertise of this board in helping us move forward. And the result is we're looking at healthy bays and evolved communities. And at the end of the day, that's a pretty good thing. So, you know, what are our FLUPSIs, our floating upweller systems? We're producing over 400,000, more than 100,000 in each of these upwellers. This is Kim Tetrol, who along with Greg Rivara from the Cornell Cooperative Extension have been, you know, absolutely essential to our operation. And here you see a couple of our volunteers with these very unassuming wooden structures that sit there and look like floating docks in the bay, but they're filtering millions of gallons of water a year through the natural filtration of the oysters, all in our mission to help save the bay. Then we have oyster farms, which are a lower level activity, but what's great about them is we can get families involved. The expertise necessary to have an oyster farm is pretty low, and we can get families to go out 2 to 3 times a week and tend to these farms. They take a lot of tending. You know, things grow in the bay and a lot of things you don't want, and they've got to take these cages, they've got to turn them over, they've got to scrub them down to get rid of the algae, they've got to shake all the little crabs out. And these kids and their parents are doing it 2 or 3 times a week, and it's a tremendous way to involve families. And you know, you can see this is over at Picket Point Beach in West Hampton. You can just see, you know, we have got 40 or 50 kids out here setting this farm up, and then they're going to take care of it throughout the entire summer. This is, you know, the same type of, you know, just tremendous educational, hands-on, and a terrific labor force. We do have to buy them cookies. You know, this year, with the help of B&B Bank, we brought in the, what was the name of that project? Girls Inc. We brought in Girls Inc. came in, and they spent the day and set up an oyster farm. This one's over at Overlook Beach, right? Yeah, Overlook Beach, which is that county park in West Hampton Dunes. And so that was our new, oh no, we've had that one for a while. That's not our new one. And so you can just see, you know, I mean, whether it's Girls Inc. or the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts, we're getting tremendous participation from the young people. And this is a slide that nobody can read, so I'll just tell you that it, you know, basically we're engaging about 5,000 people a year in this project in some way, shape, or form, and you know, that's a pretty amazing number. The net result, though, is tremendous. We're cleaning the bay, and this is this is our harvest from last year, and you can see the size of these oysters. These are 2.5 to 3 inches that we're growing in a single season. So the response rate of the oyster to the environment we're putting them in is tremendous. We're able to grow them to a size in one season that they have a real chance to survive in the wild, because as we know, there's a lot of things out there other than us that want to eat oysters as well. And this is one of our relay operations. This is again with Cornell Cooperative. We are loading up these flat bottom skiffs with barrels and barrels of oysters, taking them out to seeding sites that are located throughout Mauritius Bay. Some of them are approved by this board, some of them are approved in Brookhaven, and we're, you know, last year we put in $500,000. This year we're going to put in $750,000. We had a little issue at one of our sites, not in the town of Southampton, where we believe there's been some poaching. So in that particular site, we are coloring all our oysters in bright orange. So if you go to the store and you got a bright orange oyster, that's not supposed to be there. And you should give us a call. And this is yet another slide you can't read, but we have, through the project, installed 5 sensor stations throughout Quantock Bay and Mauritius Bay that are continuously recording water quality for dissolved oxygen, for temperature, for tide range, and salinity. And these are all reported on our website. You can go to our website and download any one of the 5 sites. The data is completely free and open, and we share it with all of the researchers, whether they're high school students doing a paper or college students doing a PhD. all that information is available for them at any time. And how are we doing this? Well, very simple. One adult oyster filters 50 gallons of water a day. And so what that means is we can take a tank like this, which is full of algae on the left, and with a couple of dozen oysters in it, we turn it into a clean tank in about 2 or 3 hours. Well, we want to do the same exact thing in Moriches Bay. And that is, there are billions of gallons of water in Moriches Bay, and the tide brings in billions and takes out billions every day. So we have to build up an oyster population that can filter those billions of gallons in 3 days. And our metric is, if we can produce 1 million oysters a year and then put them in the bay and they seed the bay themselves naturally, we'll be able to accomplish our goal, which is to create water quality that the way it was in the 60s and early 70s, the way President Warner was talking about, where we had extremely healthy bays. And these oysters are the keystone species to that project. And this is what, these are our numbers. We're filtering, well, even I can't read that. It looks like 34 billion gallons of water in this year. So that's tremendous. And you can see from a standing start in 2013 to 2016, we've just ramped this up, and we're going to keep ramping it up until we get to 1 million. But not only are we filtering the water of the bay, we're actually taking nitrogen out of the bay. The nitrogen is incorporated in the shell of the oyster and in the meat of the oyster. And so based upon scientific analysis that's been done in similar scenarios, we're estimating we're taking almost 1,200 pounds of nitrogen annually out of the bay system. So this is another very, very important benefit. And when we reach our goal of sustainability, then this will be something that's happening every year. And it's part of reducing the nitrogen inputs is one part, but treating the nitrogen that's already in the system is another part, and this is a big part of that. And this is a team effort. I mentioned my co-founder Laura Fabrizio, but we have Dwight Sergan, who's our senior scientist. This silly mime, I don't know his name, and Jim Hume, who's another one of our directors. And we're fortunate to have a tremendous volunteer staff. Dwight Sergan, John Jeans, Anthony, and Brian, who help coordinate the educational activities, that supervise the flupsies, that supervise the farms. And without them doing that work and organizing these hundreds of student volunteers, we just wouldn't be able to do it. But the team effort goes beyond that hands-on stuff. We have the Mayor Moore of West Hampton Beach and Christine Scalera. We've got our own Ed Warner. And this board who, by virtue of your cooperation with us, by making it easier for us to accomplish these physical projects, you're a part of our team and a part of this effort. And we've got our congressman to wear a shirt and to judge a shucking contest for us last year, so that was pretty much fun. But we're not done. Every year, as I said, we have a goal. We want to seed 1 million oysters a year. So how are we going to do that? Well, goals are one thing and objectives are another. So we have our objectives for next year is to increase the efficiency of our 4 flupsies, get them over 100,000 consistently. We're going to increase our efficiency on the oyster farms. We just had a community, a group of 5 or 6 property owners in the Medina Point area of West Hampton called us and they said, we want to farm and we're gonna make our kids do it and we're gonna do it ourselves. So we'll be coming back to this board to ask permission to use certain portions of the bay for oyster farms, where the community themselves are gonna support those farms and we're gonna support that community, and we really want you guys to be a big part of that. The other thing is we want to find sanctuary areas, especially like Quantuck Bay, where this board has designated the entire bay as a sanctuary area. This is a great opportunity to put in a lot of oysters there, which will spread throughout not just Quantuck Bay, but into Moneybog and over into Moriches and maybe even through the Quad Canal, you never know. And we want to continue to engage the community in these hands-on projects. We want to expand our 24/7 sensor systems. And all of this is in support of creating a healthier and more vibrant bay. And so we're just really pleased at the support we've gotten at this table and others, and that we can report back to you after 5 years of work. We see that we're accomplishing the goals we set, and so it makes us encouraged to set even higher ones for next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.
Just reminding everybody they have to come up to the podium
Yep.
for questions.
One thing I'd just like to really touch on is that you guys, and Laura especially, her ability to raise funds. Working in government, we know projects are only as good as the money that we can receive through grants or through our board or through the town. And you guys have a great avenue to be able to acquire funds, to be able to establish buoys, to be able to buoy systems, monitoring, shellfish, and then through that you bring an educational component, which I think is a wonderful thing, to educate the public that what is going on their properties directly affects the water. So I want to thank you guys for working so hard to make the bays great again.
Well, thank you, and let me take the opportunity to thank the generosity of our community, because without their financial support, as you pointed out, we can't do any of this.
Do you want to ask other questions?
Does anybody have any questions they would like to ask Aaron as far as the oyster farm and
You just have to come up to the mic, please.
anybody that wants to ask a question, please come up to the mic and introduce yourself for people that are watching on TV.
Evening, Bill Caldwell, and President of Baymen's Southampton Baymen's Association. I was just wondering, Aaron, you mentioned something, looking into doing something in concept, and just kind of what was your idea on that?
Will you have to speak?
Will, speak into the
Sorry.
mic.
What was, what were you looking to do there? What kind of scope?
Well, right, for the last 3 years, we've had a flupsy over at the Quag Village Dock, producing about 100,000 oysters a year. We've been taking those oysters out and seeding them in Mauritius Bay. There's a couple of nice sandbars right there in Quantuck. I think that would make a nice home for some of them. So that's what we're thinking about.
Yeah, I think they would be nice there. I always thought that was good. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if no one has any further input, I'd like to call up our next discussion. Edwina Van Gaal, Perfect Earth Project.
Okay, so while this is getting going, I'm Edwina Van Gaal, and I represent the Perfect Earth Project, which is a very small organization. And okay. And I live on Accabonac Harbor in Springs, which is part of the East Hampton town. And I'm a landscape designer by trade. I've been a landscape designer for a very long time. And so I started noticing that there were problems in our area. This is Georgica Pond, toxic blue-green algae, Lake Agawam. And people were talking about septic and agricultural runoff, but since the landscape profession represents about half of the land on the South Fork and North Fork as well, I thought, gee, what responsibility do we hold for this problem? And how can we help clean up the water? So I started by asking my clients, what are you using? Because I never really paid much attention. I put the landscape in. The lawn was always kind of the boring part, didn't pay much attention. So I found out that there is a lot going on in the way there was a lot of chemical being applied to most of my own projects. And I found out that they're really bad for children, especially children under 5, it's my grandson, and that they cause autism and asthma and nervous system disorders and cancers, and they're really terrible for dogs. So mostly I was looking at the pesticides, but of course we all know about nitrogen going into the water as well. It's a lot easier to track than the pesticides, so there have been a lot of people working directly on the nitrogen issue, and I'm suggesting that when you get rid of the pesticides as well, it's kind of one-stop shopping. We're going to be eliminating a problem that we haven't even sort of begun to realize yet, because the testing for pesticides is so expensive. And so after talking to my clients, we spent some time deciding, does this work? I asked them, would you try to do your landscapes without any chemicals? Because none of us knew. I'd never used them on my own property, but I'm not too fussy. And because my it's the shoemaker's shoes. It's always in transit. I'm always experimenting. So, but we found out that yes, it works. And that in addition, like how much people are using 2 to 4 times more chemicals on residential landscapes than on agricultural landscapes. So for every square foot of land that I can take out of the conventional method and turn it over to nature-based, I'm saving twice as much as a farm. So I thought I would focus on non-agricultural land. And I started the Perfect Earth Project in 2013. And a lot's gone on since then. The fact that I'm here tonight is a good example of how much things have changed. So I ask people to just make a pledge to their property not to use any chemicals. That if we all do that, there will be better alternatives if we just insist, because then you're going to make a commitment. It's like you were living with this place, but now you're getting married and you really can't cheat. And it makes the relationship a whole lot more interesting if you don't. And it's not always easy, but it's worth trying. And so what were our biggest challenges? I thought, oh, this is gonna be simple. But actually it hasn't been just so simple to get my own profession to buy in. I thought I could just start asking and everyone would say, sure. But they haven't, because we are driven by insecurities. And when someone has never been trained in how to do something at all, and they need to meet the expectations of a very high level kind of clientele, which is what we have in Eastern Long Island, they are very worried about losing their jobs. And so I've been focusing on not only raising consciousness, which is raising a demand for chemical-free lawn and landscape services, but also providing the service providers with education in how to do it. So we're doing a lot of work about what are the plants to plant and how is it done, so that the people have their expectations in line and the service providers know what to do, because this is what our landscapes have become. This is the reason why the bird population has plummeted so greatly. One of the major reasons. This is a food desert. It's basically, there's nothing in this landscape to provide life. All of the plants are exotic. Nothing eats them. And the lawns are maintained with chemicals and everything is clipped. And this is your standard landscape vehicle now. There's nothing in it that is life supporting. This is all what I call cut and kill. You know, you either clip it into shape and you kill everything else. And unfortunately, that's causing problems in the world. So what can we do? Because, to change the fact that there's this all-out war on an innocent plant. And we've forgotten that, like, the last amount of chemical, like to get that last dandelion out of your lawn, people are using another 50% of chemical when they could actually just pop it out if it really bothered them. So, and all this started with actually way back with DDT. There was a time when we thought DDT was great, as you can see. We have since discovered, of course, that it isn't, but the chemicals that have been created to replace it become ever more and more sophisticated and targeted. So people thought, well, those chemicals aren't going to hurt me. But now we know that we have a gut biome, and our gut biome is fungi and little insects and little bacteria, and there are billions and billions of them. In fact, they outnumber our own, what we'd call human cells, by 10 to 1. And since they are all the things that pesticides kill, you can imagine that when you are exposed to pesticides, they do have an effect on you. So they are affecting your cognitive and your immune system and your nervous system. So we're now looking at a world where people are getting more and more conscious and everybody's eating organic kale, and yet they're walking across still a toxic lawn to get to their organic kale patch. So my job is, how do I get people to recognize the way to do it get them on board. So there's some just basics, which I'll zip through because you guys aren't necessarily putting this into action, but this is the kind of thing we are teaching, is proper watering. Everybody gets watering wrong. People are always watering a little bit all the time, and that's like spending your entire summer in a wet bathing suit. It's real good for ticks and mosquitoes, not great for you or your lawn. And mowing high, that crowds out weeds. Use a sharp blade, prevents diseases. Reduce the size of your lawn. If you're not using it, why not turn it into something that you don't have to mow? And that could be something that provides food or just beauty. And there are lots of things you can plant that are super easy. And actually, long-term, they grow in well. These are all native plants, and they're simple. Or go without a lawn altogether. This was a job I did in upstate, and we just looked in the woods and said, oh, those are nice, took all the plant palette right from there. And the basic thing that everybody knows is that the soil is the key. The soil has a biome, just like your biome. Many of them are the same organisms. So when you're dumping chemicals on your property, you're killing the biome. And that's what does the same thing for plants that it does for you, which it makes them immune to disease, it makes them resistant to insect herbivory, and it makes them resilient. So simply by reducing or removing the chemicals and allowing the soil to heal itself, you've come a long way to start with. Don't blow your soil bare for the winter. You can just imagine spending the winter like that. It's not the best thing. That soil biome is going to freeze to death or dry out. And all the leaves you can see are in the process of being blown away and taken to the dump, which is not where they belong. The toilet plunger look that's happening in landscapes now is sort of the worst thing you can do for a tree because it suffocates them at the roots. It takes a very long time for that effect to become noticeable. So like in 20 years or so, I think we're going to see a lot of problems. That said, all of your leaves, all of everything that happens on your property, this is what your property made for itself. That's the food that it wants. So keep it there. Standing dead trees are really fabulous if they're not going to fall anywhere near your house or your car, and they don't fall all at once anyway, but they are one of the best things you can do for bird habitat. Since there's such dire news about our local birds in the news these days, that anything we can do to provide habitat is welcome, and I think they're rather beautiful. I keep everything. No biomass leaves my property, so I use all the wood. I make wood chips, use it for paths. Everything we cut, everything goes back to the property rather than taking it to the dump. 20% of our landfills are landscape waste, which isn't waste at all. And then people buy something from like redwood from California or something to put on their plant on their beds, which is a growth inhibitor. And what you really want on a planting bed is a growth stimulator. And so this is all our grass clippings, all our leaves, everything headed for the dump. Grass clippings can provide about 50% of your lawn's nutritional needs. So leave them in place. Clover does the rest. Clover fixes nitrogen, and that's what helps that grass clipping nutrition to get back into the soil. And it's about changing expectations. People need to have a different idea of what a landscape should look like. So when you see a landscape that is clipped and looks like a living room that nobody lives in, that is not a vibrant landscape. It is, as I said, a food desert and if our 50% of the environment, of the land management could be refuge for the environment, we would solve a lot of our problems, a lot of our water problems, and a lot of our environmental problems could be. So I'm working on creating, anybody needs information on buffer zones or treatment of water adjacent properties. We do consulting. We work with landscape contractors, anybody you need. So I'm sort of throwing it all out there so that you guys can pick and choose from this extensive menu of how do you want, what are your issues? How can I help you with them? Just quickly, just always ask, like, does anybody know what this bug is, and would you kill it on site? Because it's the larval form of a ladybug. And actually, when it's in that larval state, it's voracious, and that's when it eats the most aphids. But if you killed it, or even if you started spraying the aphids, then the ladybugs would have nothing to eat. So we also promote a kind of a take a minute before you spray, because probably nature will send something to eat it. Because if you saw some holes in this tree, this is a native red maple tree right outside my office, that is evidence that this tree is serving the ecology. Trees can lose like up to 20% of their leaf surface. They are like the salad bar for nature. So they're supposed to give up their leaves to keep other plants and animals alive. That's part of their role. Every living thing is part of the food web. So if don't spray, in other words, because that just ends up in the water. Most of the sprays that are used on trees are extremely toxic to aquatic organisms. So, and a bird needs about 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise one nest of young. Little birds cannot eat seeds. They need the high protein of a caterpillar. And so as soon as you spray a tree, because you've seen some caterpillars, you've probably wiped out a certain amount of, or you've made a bird's life a good deal harder, and maybe that nest won't fully develop as many chicks as it could. And so we urge everybody to plant buffers. How can we convince people that mowing to the water is not the way, that it's not going to be cool anymore as we go forward? And there are so many ways that you can plant your waterside that are beautiful, taking your inspiration from nature and letting some of your lawn just go, because actually if your conditions are right, this is one that we just stopped mowing. And this is what came up in every part of the season. It's beautiful. And you don't really need to use Roundup in your driveway. That's the most, but it is about changing your expectations, thinking again about what is beautiful and what is my relationship to this place and to my land. And how can we work with the landscape professional industry for them to reconsider the way that they work and do a better job of working with the environment instead of against it. And my personal goal is not to see any more of these. So thank you all very much. We have a book, if anybody's interested. I'm going to leave this one behind. We have stickers, put on your mailbox, and information cards, which I will leave up here so that you can take them. It tells the basic steps on the back and some of the dangers. Does anybody have a question? Okay, so we are working with Southampton Village right now, the Lake Agawam Conservancy Group, that they've asked us to help design an education program. We'll be rolling it out this winter. You'll be hearing about it. I hope everybody shows up.
Edwina, I do have one question. Being that you are based out of Accabonac, do you do anything with the East Hampton trustees as far as educating like forums like this? And have they asked you to come up with any planting schematics for the buffer zones behind the bulkheads or any of their projects?
Well, I've been working with them on the mosquito monitoring projects, and what we're doing now, and hopefully it will roll out across the entire East End, is a database that helps people when they have a mandated revegetation project, which is often buffer zones, that this database will make it very easy for people so they can plug in which area they're in, which will then tell it sort of a little bit about the soil. And then you just say, is it sun or shade or saltwater, freshwater? And up comes all the plants that you can use and all the information about the process of like the East Hampton Town resources. And the trustees, not working with them right now on any particular project, but we're always conversing because they call me a lot for suggestions and dealing with different things that are plant-based. Yeah, and once again, the education programs that we're working on will be rolled out. I'm working with the East Hampton Town Board. We're working on making demonstration gardens all around the town hall.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Edwina.
Yeah, as we can see that on our presentation, the trustees being the stewards of the 26,000 acres of underwater lands, we are the recipients of all the bad stuff that people put on the land now and have put on the land. So, basically pushing back that tide is something that our board is very interested in doing. Before I bring up the next person, Willie Caldwell, our attorney, Joe Lombardo, has been working diligently with the New York State DEC, their attorney, to be able to receive some shellfish, which the governor has promised the towns for shellfish restoration, which is going to add to better water quality. And I was just handed before the meeting this note that we're going to, in the process of receiving $1.5 million adult hard clam, 1.5 million adult hard clams, and 45 million juvenile shellfish, some are oysters on spat. So I think this is a wonderful thing, and we had to make sure that we didn't cede any of our jurisdiction to the state. We are the property owners, and we've been in several court battles with the state over our jurisdictions over the last couple hundred years, and we just want to maintain that for everybody in the public. So with that, I would like to invite Willie Caldwell, president of the Southampton Town Baymen's Association, to come give his presentation.
Evening, guys. Can you hear me? That's great news, by the way. A lot of time went into that one. It's going to be really beneficial
A lot
for.
of time. Baymen's Association was very involved in that at the beginning with setting the area for the sanctuaries, and then the legal aspect of it, because we didn't want to allow anybody to be able to mess with what we
Yeah.
hold in trust for the freeholders, looking out for the commercial baymen in this town and that heritage. So it was a long time coming. It was good that we were finally able to work that out so we could get the benefits of it without bringing any of the unintended consequences that we didn't want to get.
Super important, those consequences. And for a while, it seemed like it wasn't going to go almost. It was pretty touch and go, right?
That's true.
But I have to say that the Bayman being on board, I think, was a very good factor that we were able to present to the EDC
Oh, wow.
to Wyndham. When we
Interesting.
told them that you were on board, it was like, oh.
Oh, wow. Great. Great. Glad that it all worked out, because I was starting to worry like the program's over and we're not going to receive that.
Well,
But
this is going to be over 2 years.
Yeah.
Always.
it's halfway through that program at this point, right?
So this is commencing this autumn.
No. Great news for the Bays. Great news. Thanks,
Yep.
guys.
You're welcome.
So I guess I just want to tell you basically who I am and how I wound up as president of the Baymen's Association, and how and what things like this we've been working on for the past forever, it seems like. So let me just start by saying I grew up in Brookhaven and put myself pretty much through high school and then Suffolk Community College to work on my associate's degree, clamming and fishing to pay the bills and gas. Way, way better than getting a job somewhere. I just enjoyed it out there. From there, I had a teacher in Suffolk Community College. It was an elective for some psychology class. His assignment was once a week to read the Times and pick out an article and how it related to his class. So strumming through the Times one weekend, I come across an article about toxic algae blooms and the effect of shellfish, a lecture being held at Southampton College. I said, oh, wow, this is interesting. This is right up my alley. I'm always working in different harbors, and at times we lose one area and again another area, and I kind of wanted someone to put it together for me. So it was a Dr. Sandy Shumway who was speaking, and I went to the lecture, and it was like, basically it was one of her classes, and she was giving a lecture. There wasn't a lot of outside people, but I happened to be the only outside guy. Raised my hand and asked her some question about clams that I really wanted to know, and she's like, who are you? And I had to explain, I'm Willie Caldwell over here, and so she said, let me talk to you after this class. I said, all right. So she finished her speech, she answered my question, and she came over, she said, what are you doing? Why are you here? I said, well, I'm finishing college, like I explained to you guys, and she said, where are you going for your bachelor's degree? I said, I think I'm going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. She said, what are you going to study there? I said, genetics, I think. And she said, let me see your transcripts. And I mailed her over my transcripts, got it to her. She called me back about 3 days later. It was really quick. and said, we'll give you a free ride here if you're willing to study marine biology. I said, okay, that sounds way better. I could still fish and oyster and do all the things I was doing, but that I was really worried about in California. Plus stay close to my wife, still with me, Jen. And so came out to Southampton College and started studying there, and I was just having fun with it, taking classes because I didn't need a job. I had one. I just wanted to learn about different aspects of science, everything I can learn about marine biology. Wound up accumulating so many credits that I was able to get two bachelors, one in molecular bio, which I knew to set out for, and that. And from there, I wound up getting a house in Southampton. The oysters that I was diving in Long Island Sound, the whole crop, the whole sound just died from this nasty disease, dermo and MSX. It just basically wiped everything out. So I, at the time, was doing nothing but oystering on the weekend and going to school during the week, back and forth from Port Jeff Harbor to Southampton College 3 times a week. It was kind of crazy, but the money was there, so I was doing it. And when they died, I was beside myself. How am I going to afford my apartment in Southampton? What's going to happen now? And I started poking around out here, even though I wasn't yet a bayman out here. I was still renting an apartment and looking towards these areas. And I started poking around Mecox because we were doing some lab that we had to test water quality and turbidity over there. And I saw all these oysters. I'm like, man, I'm moving here. This is where I want to be. So wound up switching everything over, went through the process, got my license. I don't think it was probably, excuse me, and probably a year after that, I went to the trustees and I asked them, I said, hey, could we dredge these oysters in here? And no one was utilizing them, no one was using them. They were just kind of massive amounts in there, growing on top of each other, no shape to the shells. Nobody really wanted them. The inlet was not opened as frequent as now, so they were very low salinity. Like everyone said, they taste like a frog pond. And nonetheless, the trustees said, yeah, go ahead, try it. So I went at it and I walked out of there like, wow, this is way different than Brookhaven. Brookhaven, you were like the enemy when you fished for something. Here I was like, wow, they have trustees and they're gonna help me and they're gonna do all this. And it got me really excited to be in a new place where I wasn't the scourge of the earth. It was now someplace nice to be and it was a part of the community. I really enjoyed that. And that gave me a lot of incentive to join the Bayman's meetings for just as a member of the Bayman's Association. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know what they did. We hadn't had anything like that in Brookhaven that even existed. Nor did we have trustees. And so now I started to realize like, wow, the trustees really could make a difference in protecting our waters and our bays and stuff like that, as we've been witness to all these things so far tonight alone. And so from there, we started dredging the oysters. It was pretty much me out there for like 2 years. I just go, get as many as I can. They were pretty worthless, fill the boat. Slowly but surely, other people started coming in. The oysters gradually got better as we kind of worked them and culled them and manicured the crop, per se. More and more people got involved, more and more people were able to utilize it as part of their living for the year. It got to a point where there was enough people in there that we no longer needed to dredge because the crop was perfect, but we could now just rake them, go down there and take what we needed. And that oyster population has been going great in there for years. Now it's to the highest point I think I've ever seen it in 20-something years I've been out here. I'm sure maybe Billy or Ed, have you guys seen it any better than that?
Oh, it's there.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's driving. I had taken Bruce out at one point last winter, I think it was, and showed him, and his was just beside himself how many oysters could be in there, how nice they were. So going back to raking these oysters, we made everything better. We made this truly like a sustainable pond where we can take what was needed to be taken. We could see if we were taking a little too much. We could see that something was overgrown and needed to be managed a bit better. So currently, we now have it where this last 2 years, the last month or so of the season, we were able to say, all right, we didn't get through all of this. There's just more than we can get through. And when I say get through, I mean just turning over the bottom with a rake, throwing back the juveniles and taking out the big ones, just kind of breaking them up. So there's areas you don't get to because there's more than enough product there. So the last month of the season, we allow the guys to go around with dredges, kind of a nice relief after the whole winter of breaking it back with a rake. A dredge makes it a little easier, but it also allows you to cover a lot more area and overwork these beds that were left to basically go fallow, would you say, overgrown. And so that was probably one of the greatest successes there in Mecox.
Could you just explain why it's important to dredge the oysters and to break the shells and all that?
Okay, so basically an oyster grows from the hinge out in, if there's nothing around it, almost a perfect circle. And it grows until it touches something. And once it touches something, it no longer receives food on that side of its gill, and the other sides will grow faster. So what you end up is, if you start out with a whole bunch of little quarters and put them together, eventually they touch, eventually they come up, and eventually they just get all twisted. We refer to it as like a rabbit ear. They usually, the mud itself from the oysters, they make their own mud, kind of a pseudo-feces, stuff they ingest but don't actually eat. They just pass it on. It muds the whole bed. So going between the shells, as mud grows, the oysters essentially keep reaching up higher and higher, making a reef, making it deeper, and the shape just becomes absurd. So being able to turn them over, absurd meaning you can't sell the things. They're unmarketable. Unless you get a hammer, you probably can't open them and set them on a plate. It's not an oyster. I don't know what we call it, rabbit ear. It's a good term for it.
Statue.
So when you flip this whole bed over after, say, once a year or something like that, you spread everything back apart. And you kind of move everything back, put all the oysters back on top. You find whatever's in there that's harvestable, and the rest are kind of set anew in a new place to grow a new direction and hopefully have a much better shape. It's a solution to overcrowding, basically. It's just kind of spread them out a little bit more and chip all the edges and get them back to that round start, and they can go. Because when one shoots off to the side, it'll grow an inch in this little teeny ear on an oyster, but you turn that over, that little ear just kind of goes away. And so bringing them back to a nice round shape.
Thank you.
So I still didn't tell you how I became president. So I guess somewhere in like 2015 and 16, I was really into fishing for these bunker in the river, and they came on heavy. And I know most of you can remember what happened up there those summers when they died. It was pretty massive. It was pretty intense. And I had just started, really made the connections to harvesting things and selling with my company to lobstermen. And all of a sudden they were turning over and dying. And at the same point, New York State said I can only harvest for the whole state 200,000 pounds. And I was confused because I'm looking at millions and millions of animals. I think we probably lost 10 million in the canal. A couple, the falls, 16, I think, late 16 was that?
Yes.
So I began to I enlisted the help of the Nature Conservancy and ran into Wayne Grothe, which was one of our past presidents of the Baymen's Association. And Wayne Grothe was very helpful in putting me in touch with the right people to work to basically lobby Atlantic States Marine Fishery Council, who held a £500 million quota for the east coast of the United States. We got 200 or 240,000 of that. And initially, up till the 60s, we were the state that harvested all the bunker on the whole East Coast. We had the bunker plants in Napi. This was the bunker capital of the East Coast. But what had happened is Virginia was able to harvest them the same way, away from people who didn't like the smell of bunker. They had it in Virginia, and they also got the younger fish there. So as a bunker gets older, it starts here as a peanut. You'll see them firstborn, and then you won't see them for another 2 years. They go down south and get big, and once they're big, they come back up here. They were over-harvesting those fish to a point where they weren't making it up to the sizes that we saw, so we had kind of a void in it. And I think 2014, they initiated this 500 million pound cap, but don't quote me, roughly 500 million pounds. It changes a couple percentages every year. And now they slowed down Virginia a bit. I think Virginia got 396 million and Jersey got 98 million. So basically all the fish were there. Once they slowed that, the fish, boom, came back to fish kill levels. And in working with the Nature Conservancy, we basically argued we need something more than that, because once we got to fish kill level, they said, take as much as you want. The same thing happened in the canal. They said, oh, you're only allowed 6,000 pounds a day, but now that they're dying, take them all. We got this special law. And I'm going, what's the law? It was basically 2% of the quotas put aside for any emergency event like this. The only problem is when this event happens, none of us would be quick enough to harvest 2 million pounds with our current gear or practices or anything like that. So it was like kind of a moot point. But finally, through Wayne and through the Nature Conservancy, I was able to make a move. And I think we're at like 3.4 right now for landings, not for landings, for what we're allowed to harvest from the state. We haven't reached the landings yet, but I think the industry will come up around it. And in doing so, during all this and Wayne's suggestion to become president, I inquired and see where we're at with that. And everybody thought it'd be a good idea if I did do it. So I became here, and now somehow it's been going on for years now, right? It seems like just yesterday. And then, so now that we've been president, we've been working on a lot of great things. You guys just witnessed us getting word on that amazing ruling, because we, the Baymen, were terrified that if New York State was to give us clams in the town, then someone from another town would be able to come in and say, well, New York State put them here, so they're all of ours. And one thing that happens, not with fish, but with shellfish, is that you have to keep it to a town level. So anyone in Southampton town can harvest, any freeholder can harvest here. But if we let the whole state in, could you imagine the oysters and meacox? You'd have a million guys in there. Like, there's the only way is to control it is to keep it in the town. And so this was a drastic and huge step. And so now we did get the clams, and we kept our,
And we're getting some oysters. too.
some oysters in it. And we're gonna be kept as individual, town of Southampton, not involved with anyone else. And so these things are going as spawner sanctuaries. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but I know the Oyster Project was talking about spawner sanctuaries. And basically is what we wanna do is put masses of shellfish in certain areas so that they're close proximity when they spawn. The female and the male are in close proximity, and we can have fertilized eggs wandering around the bays for months until they settle. And these spawner sanctuaries are huge. This is 1.5, right?
Adult.
Adults are going somewhere, and we have the Cornell Cooperatives is doing, they've put in millions already, right? I know they've been,
College did, Southampton College.
Southampton College
Yeah,
behind it, so they've
Almost
been
3 million.
3 million, and just in 3 million, we've seen the clams explode in Southampton, like, I guess, Eastern Shinnecock Bay right now. There's probably 13 guys out there on a regular basis making a full-time living out there, just in clams alone. And a lot of this can be attributed to these spawner sanctuaries. And so for us to get something like that, augmenting our population by another 1.5, almost essentially, 25% increase of what we have already, right? 25, 30. So we did a lot of work with setting up the areas of where these spawner sanctuaries can be, because originally with the college, and Goldberg was involved in that, we had a certain area that they could put their clams, because none of the baymen wanted to lose this particular piece of real estate over here, because, last Christmas I go there, I could hide from the wind, I can make a couple $100, there's probably some clams there. So we really had to figure out, as their projects went from $500,000 to $1 million to $3 million now, they needed area to grow. And luckily, at the same time, the baymen was starting to realize, wow, we're actually seeing desired results from these sanctuaries. So they were willing to give a little bit on an area that maybe they hadn't fished in the last 30 years, even though it might have been their favorite year. It was pretty apparent it wasn't coming back. But if we can put some adults there, we solve this problem, because they would still be spawning and broadcasting into the bay. We just weren't able to get the babies to settle there because the water's not 100%. And that whole slide they showed on the oysters filtering water, clams filter an extreme amount of water. Oysters are the highest, but clams are way up there too. And to put these masses of clams on the edge of areas that no longer grow, essentially pushing back the line of what we call a dead water, or we always say, if green lawns, brown bay, like the speaker before me, like it kind of browns the bay out. So if we can push that back with adults, these huge populations of spawner sanctuaries are fabulous. And it's pretty crazy. I've seen baymen like patrolling these areas, because we now told them, you're legally allowed to go over there and take the clams. And we're gonna put $1 million over there, but we need you to stay out of there because it's better for us all around. And they stayed out. They actually are policing it, people telling me about it, like, this is happening, and we haven't had one issue yet. I saw him painting orange oysters in that project, like people stealing it. He did say it wasn't Southampton, because I would have been asking a lot of questions about that, but the guys have been great out here. So it seems like the way I kind of wound up here is that a lot of people care about what's going on, but a lot of people don't care to get up and speak to people or care to hunt something down on National Youth Fishery Council or stuff like that. So someone had to do it, and I guess that became me. So that put me here. And one of the other things we're working on besides the spawner sanctuaries was the meacox management plan. That was a lot of time, a lot of meetings, a lot of stuff. Basically, these things need to be watched, and only people who can see what's going on are people who are living in it and swimming in it and fishing in it or clamming boots on the ground. And you see a lot more than you think you see working through these, watching these systems function. When we had to go to opening the inlet of meacox because the tide was getting too high because it closes off to the inlet, the trustees weren't able to say, okay, open it today, and now went to a big rigmarole of the state had to be involved, the Army Corps, everybody was involved, and nobody really cared or was in a hurry enough to make enough decisions to say, okay, you can open it tomorrow. It was become stalling and become problems, and it wasn't just the baymen, it wasn't just anyone that had user conflicts in there, the farmers, everybody had problems in that place. And so we hashed out this plan, and I think final draft mode, right? Is it out, or we're really close, right? It's almost done. And so that'll give the control of that place, that actual inlet and what happens in there back to the trustees, something that could be dealt with by people who've been working this and opening these inlets forever, hundreds of years, and now 150 years? How long have you been open there?
300 years.
300? It was that long. I almost said that.
Centuries. Day one.
Yep. and
So for
before that,
300 years,
Indians.
they would know way more than I would know, or any state or Army Corps of Engineers is going to know about this process. But it was a fight just to get that control back to the trustees. And as the more I go into this, president of Baymen's Association, the more I see that trustees are a huge resource, and they're like friends of mine. We have conversation all the time. What can we do? Where can we get at this? And I didn't think it was like that. The first time I asked them to dredge oysters in 2000, I was terrified. I thought they were going to eat me alive and say no to me. And now it's like a great, great thing to have in the town. And hopefully people appreciate it, but I sure know that fishermen in the town have gotten a lot better off with it. And we did some work I also did some work in Peconic Estuary program. I guess they're rewriting what they spend their money on because it's been 10 years since they made a draft and a lot of things have changed. So it's almost similar to MECOC's management plan, except there's no inlet involved, but there's a lot of user groups and a lot of money and a lot of monitoring that needs to take place, and they're just trying to put it back together. We had some input on that. There was a few meetings that I sat and listened to, a lot of things about lawns and harmful algae blooms and all the things that we're kind of living every day over here is happening there too. All these estuaries, this area right here, I've spent as much time as anyone in these waters down here. Anywhere from growing up in Western Mauritius now to ranging all over the place. It's truly a great area, and everyone here tonight is talking about making the water better. I literally go home every night and say, oh, this one estuary, this one creek, it's garbage now. The water's brown, the water's red, the water's this, and complaining that someone's lawn or they're cutting the buffers down. It happens everywhere all the time, and you slowly just keep losing functioning pieces of this estuary that's such a productive thing. Sustainability, there could be 100 baymen out here. I'm sure there was in 50s, 60s, there was many baymen out here, right? And now there's, a couple dozen of us maybe, most of them in and out part-time, but there's, I would say 20 full-time people out here. But it could produce so much more, but we have to address these issues in the headwaters and all the upland surface runoff water. I know there's a lot of work being done on nitrates and septic systems and stuff like that, which is super important. But I think I've been in places like working up in Greenwich, Connecticut, where there's sewer treatment plants everywhere, and the shellfish populations are able to grow up around something that's steady. But when you have these rain events and you have all these lawn chemicals and everything, I think it may be, if I had to say, like the weed killers, crabgrass killers, like they just go in and they just wipe out the algae. So now you would see a buildup of nitrogen, but not because you're putting too much in, but there's nothing yet to consume it. So I look at it that way, and the more people like Project Earth talking about something like this, and the more let your lawn go brown, let it go to dandelion, all that's, it doesn't matter, it's just grass. But when you go down to the water or you go to have dinner and you eat some fresh shellfish or something from the bay, it's like, this is way better than coming in with cutting my grass or having someone do it. So I guess I still have a lot of work to do on this whole Save the Bays kind of rant I'm on, but so far so good. The trustees have been amazing to me and to us. Does anyone have any questions? Anything they're curious about?
Well, you could probably touch on the bunker population and how it's really changed the whole food web in the ocean, because now we have whales, dolphins,
Yeah,
and
that's
sharks
super important.
literally right on the beach. Striped bass, bluefish. I mean, without the bait fish and the smaller fish, being a sustainable harvest, and then like you said, you take them out, we're going to miss that whole part of the food web. But it's here stronger than ever, and it's
It's amazing.
tourism,
It's-
recreational, commercial.
Right.
Everybody gets to enjoy
People don't
it.
realize how much you rely on the forage fish being plentiful and appropriately managed.
It was a huge conversation. The reason why the Nature Conservancy backed me so strongly was because the only time that basically I harvest them with a seine net, so I need to put someone on the beach and wrap my net out and back to shore and pull it in. So only 300 feet. So I need schools of fish running down the shore on a frequent basis in order for me to harvest them. So when the fish come in heavy, whether it's fish kill levels or getting there, we're able to go into places like the river or Eastern Shinnecock Bay and take when there's a lot. But when they're swimming by in the ocean and the whales are consuming them, we just watch them swim, hoping, there's no problems with them, but maybe a little come in that we could reach out. So Nature Conservancy really liked it. And part of their pitch, they were out filming me netting this fish. They really liked the fact that if something wound up in my net, like a striped bass or a weak fish, everything was alive and everything we could sort through them. I mean, 99% of the time, it's just straight bunker. But every once in a while, something random will pop in there, but you pick it up, you set it over the side, and it swims away. Literally not what they usually work in the bunker industry down south in these giant purseine boats. They were totally against that because you have these great populations like we have of whales on them, and then you would have a boat come with a net and wrap up 1 million pounds and everything else in there. And was kind of a really bad press for the bunker industry. Even though I still would say it's generally clean, but that could happen when you're using nets on mile-long scales, like you just don't know what's in there. So they really liked us and in New York the way we fish, and they were able to get us that quota because of sustainability. And since they slowed down the southern states, we now see that there's bunker from, they just last year, they just banned purseining in all New York State waters. So we weren't allowed to do it, but boats were able to come in to Gardiner's Bay and off our ocean and take what they want and just drive them back to their state. Didn't matter where you caught them, it only mattered where you sold them, where you landed them. So they just eliminated that part of the fishery, and this summer, the fish have come in Peconic Bay. Like the entire Peconic Bay is bunker from one end to the other. And I'm just sitting there thinking, what's different from last year? And the only thing that we didn't have this year that we did with last year was purseiners working in Gardiner's Bay. So I couldn't fathom that they could scoop it all up, but now I see and instantly they're coming in by the millions and they're coming. It's really interesting what's going on in there
And
now.
the big boats use the pumps. They have no way of sorting fish. They can take.
No way, yeah, it's not hands-on. I mean, I
Like
pick
what
my
you're
fish
doing.
up, scoop them up, and I know what's in there.
They use the big vacuum pumps.
Yep, they vacuum
And
them in.
everything's dead once it comes out of the pump.
Yeah. It's pretty like awesome in terms of the size scale they are, like just an awesome scale of what they fish, but it's not hands-on what we're doing, trying to do here. And I guess I would say it is sustainable just because they're counting their fish, and the Land State Fishery Council is measuring what they're doing and giving them the right amount. I think they say 50% of what the standing stock is what we're harvesting. So they say there's 1 billion pounds of bunker in the Atlantic Ocean on our coast every year, and they allow us to take half of it because to make way for the peanuts. But I don't think in the public's eye, when you have somebody out there fishing up for striped bass and they're watching the boat put a net next to them, it just seems bad, you know. And I'm sure that it happens in, like you said, pumps and hands-on. It just doesn't work too good.
Will, would you mind talking just a little bit about churning, explain it, and then just talk a bit about it, please?
Okay.
We've gotten a couple questions about it,
Yeah.
so it would be helpful if you would address it.
Okay, so churning is basically a process of using an outboard motor. It sets on basically a sawhorse with skis. The motor itself never touches the bottom, but it's angled in such a way that the water flowing from the prop rinses the clams out of the bottom. So essentially it's used to harvest, not hard clams because they're only down 1 inch and we can harvest them with rakes. But when it comes to soft shell clams that are down about as deep as your elbow, maybe 18, 20 inches, or a razor clam, which he's not down that far, but as soon as you disturb him, he cranks down like 2 feet, you'll never find it. And shellfish of those two species are harvested with this machine. Basically what you do is you draw a line in the sand with this water jet and rinse out the sand, and the sand rolls it to the ground pretty quick, and then the steamers or the razor clams just keep rolling and wind up on top for a few minutes. The razor clams are so fast that as soon as they hit the bottom, they dig back in. They're used to this high wash tides and ripply sand. They're always able to dig right back in, so we actually catch those on a fly with a basket. The steamers, on the other hand, take them more like 20 minutes to a half hour by the time all of them go down. They start going down right away, but 20 minutes, they're pretty much back in the ground. So we were able to dislodge them from the ground and then go back and pick them back up. And I think what happens a lot when people see us doing that, and this practice has been done forever, right? Since outboards were invented. I remember George.
1920 clam case in Mecox, they were using actually gasoline engines to blow them out down there. So that was one of the clam cases that the trustees won against the DEC that would allow us ownership and the ability to regulate harvest as we see fit.
That would be good. I know East Hampton they weren't able to churn for a while, and they actually just got it back. The trustees just gave it back to them, so they just opened up. It's legal in all of New York State, but certain towns take different views on it for whatever reasons. But what I see is I've been doing it since I got here, and I started out when I lived in Brookhaven, I'd use a pitchfork to get steamers, and that's what I did. And I break so many steamers with a pitchfork, even though I was what I would consider a professional about it. It's just really hard to not break clams when you're working below your feet. Where this method is so delicate, you don't break any of them. I think that day you were out with me on the boat, Bruce, we made a cut with one of these machines and picked up one scoop. Like you take a scoop every foot for the length that you dig them out, and I picked up one scoop. There was probably 40 keeper clams in there, and there was probably 4,000 baby clams. And literally, you shake the rake, the babies fall right through, and you take the adults out. It's overcrowded in most cases. When these estuaries are producing steamers or razor clams, there's too many of them. And we run into more cases where it's like, oh my God, there's so many in this area. I can't wait till they're market size, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're just gone. They get so incredibly dense that they just somehow at some point in the summer when it's warm, they just suffocate. But allowing us to go in there and use these techniques, we're able to delicately not hurt anything. We kick a little bit of sand around, but we put it back and it's not hurting anything. We're never working in vegetation like the complaints are always you're in vegetation. I mean, none of that ever happens. It doesn't work. There's not enough pressure in the water we're using to wash to actually, the grass would hold up to it. It's not like we're blowing giant holes in the earth and the eelgrass and everything else that people are concerned about is moving. We're pretty much like sweeping the sand out of the way. And if there's a piece of grass in your patio and you're trying to sweep past it, you gotta like dig the sand out of it. It just doesn't work when it comes to eelgrass and stuff like that. And generally, the areas that have eelgrass don't have razor clams. I mean, there might be one mix in there, but it's not something that mixes together when we're running over eelgrass. And a lot of people are always like, you're killing the eelgrass. I'm like, there isn't, this area never had it, never will. It goes dry, it's this, that. So a lot of misconceptions by the public of what's actually taking place underfoot when we're out there harvesting with churning. And I think I told you guys, anybody that ever wants to come on my boat and go to work with me for 10 minutes, I'll run and pick you up. You can witness what's happening and you'll see for yourself, like it's a very delicate operation. And most of you have seen it or, yeah.
I thought it was amazing. You're definitely a credit to your profession. Because the mindset is a prop in the water. You can be chewing up everything. I didn't see one clam damaged. And when he was shaking them clams, it's going right back down in the same trough that the motor blew out. He'd move down a little bit further. I mean, it's just like a well-oiled machine.
Right, it works, and it works to an amazing level in mecox. Like mecox is generally, like most healthy estuaries, our problem with harvesting shellfish isn't how long it takes to catch a bushel of clams. It's how long it takes to handle a bushel of clams, get out all the undersized seed and everything else and put it back, and then take away the adults. So the process is really a process of removing the bigs out of all these small ones. And it's always been that way in mecox. We've seen a couple of years, I think one bad year where the place was a complete casualty, and that's gonna be fixed now that the mecox management plan is gonna come in. That addresses all those issues. So and there's literally no way to get the shellfish, the soft clams out of mecox if you didn't employ this technique. Like anyone who tries to say you could do it the other way, it would be kind of impossible. There's no way you can dig a hole 18 inches down in the sand in waist deep water or chest deep water or however deep we can go. But we're very limited with these machines. I mean, we have to be in this much water so that the water pumps can pick up water, and we can't go much more than this high with the tide because the motor itself would be underwater. So we get certain areas where we can work at certain times, and it's a whole art. It's a whole art to use these machines. And I think there was some complaints this summer when the guys were steamering over in Shinnecock, maybe. Shinnecock was, I guess traditionally there was probably 20 or 40 different two-man teams churning in that bay on a regular basis, is up to maybe the 60s or something like that. There was always crews all over those flats, and those flats were on fire, like really good, very productive, lots of shellfish coming out of there. And then with fading water quality, slowly but surely the clams population faded, and then there is no more of to say. But I've seen it this year. There's some stuff going on over there, some hopes of.
I do know in '85 when we had the first brown tide, the razor clams and the steamers were the most susceptible shellfish.
Yeah.
They perished and they didn't come back until like the early '90s in any amount, even to reestablish their territories. So water quality is very important. I mean, if we had water quality that was good like the 60s and early 70s here, we would have steamers all the time, but it isn't that way.
I've always said it, and you always said it too, if everything that we ever see that settles and babies in the bottom ever made it to adult sizes, this stuff would be worthless, because so many babies come everywhere, but they never survive through their first summer. They just get, the water's too poor that, and once it gets warm, there's so much more stress on the animal because it's starving or it's dealing with some pollution or something like that, that they just can't make it through the warm summer months. And so what essentially happens is all our catch is regulated on size. Generally, like a hard clam, they make it 1 inch at the hinge, which is just a size that 50% of the population has at least reproduced one time. So what happens is, in that one time of reproducing, the same with steamers, they go and they reproduce in the summer when it's really hot, because it's the most important thing a clam could do. Most things is just to reproduce. And then once they do that, there's no food or there's bad food there, and they just starve and suffocate. So we do see the babies, but the adults never make it through that, and they never get to us. They're always sub-market and dying before we get to see them. So everyone's always says, you tip you out there to get the last clam, but theoretically, if I'm getting 25 cents for a clam, I need 1,000 or more of them just to pay my bills for the day to make any kind of money. Like, I'm not going to go to this corner and try to get the last clam out of there. Like, if I can't get 1,000, it's not worth it. So we do go to areas of high density and work, but we're not out there searching for the last dinosaur trying to get them, because there's no money in a 25-cent clam. You need a boatload or somewhere there, somewhere in between. But so it's kind of interesting how people perceive it. And let me tell you about Brookhaven, that perception was way worse. People would scream at you, no matter whose house you went near, you would get an earful of how you can't touch their clams, I'm ruining the world. And this was 90s, like this wasn't even now. Now it's ridiculous over there. But here, much different town. Southampton town is, generally the people are amazing out here. But it's few user group conflicts, few issues with that churning when guys are flats fishing or fly fishing. They're looking for really clear water. They're trying to hunt a fish. And here I am kicking the sand around and making a little rile. They're like, well, what is dirty? Oh my God, like, you must be doing something wrong. But it's no more than the next storm that blows through and moves the sandbar somewhere else. It's kind of, did that answer? Did that help?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Will.
You're welcome.
Really, I just want to say that in my tenure on this board, I think it's been a fantastic synergy with the Baymen's Association. I think you've done a fantastic job at heading that up, as your predecessor did before you and the guys. I think that even the examples that you gave us, getting the Mecox management plan to where it is today, where the trustees can retain entire control of that, that doesn't just benefit, what you do, harvesting shellfish to make a living. It benefits, as you pointed out, the farmers and all the homeowners that live there, and the beachfront homeowners, everybody. Great synergy that benefited everybody. And being able to get this 1.5 million clams and then another, 45 million juvenile shellfish coming in from the state to help have clean water for everybody and help keep a nice thriving ecosystem. Again, started with the synergy with the trustees and the Baymen working together on it.
Yeah, it's been
good.
enjoyable. It's been a pleasure. I thought it was going to be a lot more, I don't know, I don't know what the right word is to say, but harder in dealing with you. It's actually been a pleasure, and I think we have accomplished a lot.
I think that the synergy has been so good that it's going to pay dividends to the people of the town of Southampton for generations to come.
Right.
And I'd like to see that continue. I think it's a good thing. I think you do a great job, and I'd like to say thank you for coming here tonight
Well, thank you.
to speak to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more question
Yep.
for you too. You also let the people know, besides the clams, the babies growing up and dying before they get these other predators, what eat the baby clams, like the sea ducks, the swans, the crabs, the blue claws. It's a
Yeah,
big food chain.
everything's eating the clams. Basically, most shellfish, they start out really small, like just settled. They're like, I would say something like a poppy seed, something maybe you couldn't even see. And at that point, the whole world eats them. At that size, probably the biggest predator are killifish. Like they just eat them
So it's
all right out of
important
the
to have
sand.
for the food chain.
It's a huge part of the food chain. It totally is. And as they get bigger, they get less of a predator suite, or what kind of predators can eat them, and all the way up to usually pretty big clams. I mean, the only thing eating a big clam is a conch or something like that.
Conchs.
Conchs. And
Seagulls.
Seagulls, if they're dug out of the bottom, they'll definitely take them and smash them in the parking lot. But they're not any good at finding them. They can't find them. But I do see the seagulls when You get a set of small clams, when they're small, they just go in like this much water and just paddle their feet, and then they go around the hole and they'll eat all the babies. But all that plays into this super high density and getting it thinned out. The swans are a little crazy because with the steamer is down itself 18 inches, like I mentioned, but their neck comes to the surface of the sand. And the swan is able to come down and grab a hold of that and bite it off. And the same thing happened with flounder and hard clams. Like hard clams are like genetically made that flounders come along and nip the tip of the siphon sticking out of the water, and a clam will just grow it back. Whereas in the steamer case, he's now 18 inches down with a 12-inch neck. He's pretty much she's in trouble. So the swans do. I'm not a huge fan of swans, but
That's why I brought it up.
So I think he's bringing it up because when we do go steamering in Mecox in the winter and you make this hole in the ice and you cut a trench and go back to pick up the clams, the 13 swans that fly into the hole are all butts up in the air, eating every clam coming up, swallowing my steamer's hole. So by the time I get there, gone. Like what should have been a bushel is now 5 pounds, and I'm chasing swans like shoo, and they just don't. They never leave. It was great. So me and swans have a little bit of a.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
guys.
guys.
So
It's good talking to you guys.
Joe, can you do us a favor and touch on the legal aspects of what we went through with the DEC and allowing the clams to be placed in our bottom, and how the mechanism that you worked on and the board
Sure.
worked on was going to allow this or not?
The issue that when you're dealing with New York is New York does not like to give up property. And the bottom line is that, at least in Southampton, if you put the clam on the bay bottom, you know, you sort of have given it to the town trustees. The issue of ownership is something that, excuse me, I'm losing my voice. We had a back and forth, and I think what we were able to achieve was an understanding that because these are going into a spawner sanctuary, and we're talking about basically a no harvest zone for 25 years or so, that there are going to be millions coming off of the 1.5 million, and it's going to be impossible to decide which one came from the state and which one came from us. And that's the hope, that the trustees will see that there's no harvesting for an appreciable period of time. The clams and the oysters will be allowed to propagate and basically replenish the whole bay. And at that point, once they leave the spawner sanctuary, they're ours. So that was the understanding that we came to. And I think it's going to work out just fine. We're in the process just of finalizing the language for the resolution that'll be on the meeting of the 7th for the trustees to adopt, hopefully.
It basically allows, you know, we are trustees of the underwater lands.
Yeah.
Holders, taxpayers.
I'm sorry, I always talk as if everybody knows all the stuff that I've had to learn over the years representing the trustees. The trustees in Southampton are the largest landowner in the township. And that underwater land is something very precious because the Dongan patent guaranteed ownership of the products of the sea to the freeholders and taxpayers of the town. And the trustees through the years have always maintained the position that they're there for the freeholders and the trustees. And as Will said about the Brookhaven Bayman, it took me 10 years to finally get the Brookhaven Bayman case to the point where we won it. And that was to prevent the Brookhaven Bayman from coming in here and taking the property of the taxpayers. They did it under the guise of saying, well, we're going after migratory species and you have no control over migratory species. And the court said, that is true, but the landowner has a right to tell you that you can't set foot on his land. And that's how we were able to prevail. And that's something that I have to say, I admire the trustees, because there's no settlement. We have to win this case. There's no way to find a happy medium with somebody. We have to win the case. Every time we go into court, we have to win.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Does anybody else, would anybody like to speak during the public portion address the board on any topics that are, relevant to your, the Remsenburg, Birches Bay area. If not, I'd like to make a motion to close.
Second.
Wait. Hold on one second. I just want to take a second to thank so many people who are here tonight and some that are working behind the scenes. I want to thank our speakers tonight, Aram Tertunian and his co-pilot there, Laura Fabrizio from Mauritius Bay Project. I want to thank Adwina Von Gaal of Perfect Earth Project. There are a lot of projects here tonight. And also Will Caldwell, president of the Southampton Town Baymen's Association. These people are doing, we live in a beautiful place. And the work that these people are doing is helping to keep it beautiful. So the importance of water quality, as we all sitting up here know, is paramount. And we're at a critical juncture and action is so important. So each of the people that spoke here tonight, hopefully, perhaps you all that are sitting and listening here or watching at home, maybe you'll take something with you that you can do, whether it's growing oysters, whether it's taking some of the pesticides or fertilizers that you use on your lawn now. Maybe it's just learning something new this evening. That was the whole point of these evening sessions. And I had no idea, Ed, that the trustees used to move from hamlet to hamlet throughout the town historically. And I just think it's great when I want to thank all of you for showing up here tonight because it makes a difference when we have an audience. So thank you. The next evening meeting will be in Flanders in December. It'll be December 10th, Tuesday, December 10th at 7 p.m. And we welcome you there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
So, does anybody else have anything to offer? Because if not, I'd like to close. I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.